So I'm Mike Mandel, and I did this project that's behind me, the baseball photographer trading cards back in the mid-'70s. I grew up in the Los Angeles area, and I became a big baseball fan when my grandmother went to San Jose from LA and picked up a San Francisco Giants baseball cap in 1958, which was the first year that the Giants and Dodgers came out to California. I was living in LA, but I got a Giants cap, which was a San Francisco team, which I decided I really liked the idea that I would be the kind of the odd person out in my group of kids. So I was 7 years old running around with my Giants cap, and all these Sandy Koufax Dodger fans would be upset with me while I was talking to them about how Willie Mays was going to win the next game for them. There wasn't a lot of baseball on TV except like the World Series. So you really couldn't see the baseball players who you cared about. Even if you went to the Coliseum in Los Angeles to see the Dodgers play, they were way out there. You couldn't really see what they looked like. You kind of had in your mind some kind of inherent statistics of their career. A lot of that you got from baseball cards because all the stats of every player of all their career was on the back of the cards. And there was all kinds of little anecdotes about them as well. So it was really fun to be a kid and collect the cards and get, because you could then actually see the players and get to know them a little bit more. I guess one thing I could say is it was important to collect the full set, and you really couldn't get a full set by just going to the store and buying them. You had to get a pack, open it up. It was a surprise to see what you were going to get. And then you identified which ones you needed for your, to help you complete the set, and which ones you still needed, and you kept buying cards and necessarily trading with your friends to try to get that done. I was a grad student at the San Francisco Art Institute in 1974. This was a moment that all of us really recognized how photography was being connected, gathered into the art world that had always kind of snubbed photography up until this point. All the great photographers like Edward Weston, Ansel Adams, they were known within the photo world, obviously, but if you wanted to buy one of their prints, they were fairly cheap because they weren't really considered to be collectible. All that changed really in the mid-'70s, and I guess if you were a grad student like myself, you're on top of what's going on, and you kind of realize how things are changing. So now all these photographers that, people like Harry Callahan and Aaron Siskind and people that would not be everyday names to most Americans, all of a sudden could become these well-known, famous artists and be collected by the museums and the galleries and collectors and all that stuff. So I was really thinking about what the negative impact of that was. I really loved the fact of being a student and having such easy access to talk to the important photographers of the time. I was mentioning my relationship to Robert Heineken growing up in Los Angeles. I could talk to Robert. I wasn't even a student of his at UCLA. I mean, I just met him because we would go to the same art openings, the same photo openings, and he would just start talking to people. And I connected with him, and he would have me over to his house, and we would talk about photography, and he would tell me about his life. And that was kind of a level of relationship that was very common within the photo community in the early '70s. People were just really regular people. They were nothing more than that. The fact that they were going to become these celebrities now kind of made that into somewhat of a dangerous or an at-risk situation from my point of view. And I decided to try to satirize this idea of the new celebrityhood of photography. I kind of took the same model as the way baseball cards were distributed. I made them into packs of 10 at random, so you really wouldn't know exactly who you were going to get except for who you could see on the front and who was on the back. And there was also a piece of gum that was in each pack. I was living in San Francisco. I was going to the Art Institute for grad school, and Imogen Cunningham was not teaching there, but she was somebody who was around, and you could easily call her up and go over and see her if you wanted to. So I figured she would be a really good person to start with because she was very well recognized, and she was elderly. She was, getting to in her 70s at that time. She loved the idea. She thought it was very funny. She wouldn't wear a baseball cap, though. She wanted to wear a Mao cap, which I tried to convince her, maybe the Cincinnati Reds, would that be okay? But no, she needed the Mao cap, so we had to go get that. And then we made some pictures, and I taught her how to throw a pitch, like how to do a wind-up and throw a pitch. So we did some, simulated pitching, and she actually did have a nice little follow-through. And I made, I think, a pretty nice picture of hers. I think her card was probably one of the most sought-after cards of the whole series. But really, from my point of view, it was the perfect entry, because once I got Imogen Cunningham to say okay, and once I had a nice picture of her, she could call her friend Ansel Adams up and say, Mike would like to come over and do a picture of you. So when I talk about the celebrityhood of photography, he was a celebrity. People, everyday Americans would know who Ansel Adams was. So I did call him and wanted to make his picture. He said, great, but it's going to be about 2 months because I've got XYZ. I got there, it was kind of a foggy day, a typical Monterey Carmel foggy day. I brought with me my 2 1/4 and my flash, because I figured it was kind of needed a little extra light. Inadvertently, I connected the flash to the flash bulb synchronization instead of the electronic flash synchronization. So when I made all these pictures of Ansel, they were all underexposed because I was using the flash as a fill, and the fill wasn't happening, it wasn't synchronized at the right time. And I called him up as soon as I developed the film and said, I have a really embarrassing thing to tell you, because Ansel Adams was the guy who wrote all the books about the zone system. He was like Mr. darkroom, know everything world. And I was telling him how I just screwed up all the pictures. And he said, that's no problem. Let's just look in the book. And 2 months later, I had another appointment. So I did come and brought my flash and made sure that I made pictures with the flash and without. So I had, with me all kinds of stuff. I had a catcher's mask, I had umpire's gear, I had baseball caps from all the teams of all the major leagues. From there, I just photographed other photographers in the Bay Area, because that's where I was living. Made arrangements to go down to Los Angeles and photograph Robert Heineken, someone that I had already made friends with. And I sat down with Robert Heineken at a coffee shop in Santa Monica one day and said, let's come up with some names so that, I have some in my mind, but maybe you can help me out. So he gave me a whole list of people he thought that I would be remiss if I didn't ask to make them part of the project. And then he gave me a check for $100 and said, here, this will help you, it'll give you another 2 or 3 days on the road. And I never forgot that. That was such again, I was not even his student. It was just something he just did because he was a really sweet guy. And that started me on the project of traveling across the United States. My girlfriend at the time, Allison Wolpert, and we drove our little 1967 Renault 10, which is, you probably don't know what that looks like, but it's a very tiny little car. It's kind of like a VW Beetle, but French. And we would drive, 300, 400 miles a day. We had our Society for Photographic Education directory, so that if we were getting to a place in Arizona and we needed to photograph Frederick Sommer, we could find somebody nearby who would put us up. And I think in the 14,000 miles that we drove around the country in 4 months, we only had to pay for a motel 4 times, and we stayed with people who belonged to the SPE or were friends of photographers that we were, given information to call. So again, that speaks to that reference I made earlier about how the community photography was very supportive and down to earth and unpretentious, and that's really what the cards were about, was the fact that we were going to lose that. And the people who participated in the project, they were making fun of themselves, right? They were photographers, and they were now, a baseball card was being made of them. The back of the card had all the kinds of statistics that you would find on a real baseball card, like their height and weight, and which hand they throw with, but also other things that pertain to photography, like their favorite camera, favorite photo paper, favorite developer, favorite photographer, favorite film, things like that, that were just kind of photo statistics. And then they had an opportunity to write anything that they thought should be on the back of the card. So that was their opportunity to do whatever they wanted to. They could either make something funny or try to be funny or try to make something that had some reference to a baseball card, and that was always fun to see what they would come up with. I mean, I just assumed that hopefully people would buy these things, but once I got some coverage in media, actually it was the only project I think that probably could be said that it was covered by Sports Illustrated, Newsweek, and Popular Photography at the same time. So it was that kind of a project. It kind of moved in different directions and allowed it to be kind of put into the world. And once that happened, and once the San Francisco Chronicle did a piece, then all of a sudden the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art wanted, they needed a lot of cards, and I was just making, a few at a time, but I had to make lots of them. I had made, out of the 134 photographers, we made 3,000 of each one, so there were 400,000 cards. All of a sudden I had to get these things produced as packs because I just had all these cards in boxes, and so I had to hire a bunch of high school kids who would come over, and I'd say, okay, here's a bunch here. These are the nationally known photographers, and these are the regionally known photographers. Make sure that there's like an equal number of each in each pack of 10 cards plus the piece of gum. They had to put those together. We had a heat sealer that would close the polyethylene bag, and we made a carton of 36 packs. And I would sell them to like the museum bookstore. I wanted to make them extremely accessible, so they were $1 a pack. So the cards, I think they served the purpose of kind of making fun of this celebrityhood of photography, and I think they succeeded in the fact that they got out there. I still have a bunch of them that are in my home, and the irony, of course, is that now that that was 1975, and now we're in 2020, so that's what, 45 years. Now the cards are really a collectible in the other sense of collecting, more of it. They're kind of valuable as these vintage 45-year-old objects. So then now people are buying them for a lot of money. You can look for an Ansel Adams card on eBay and it's over $100. And it's kind of turned upside down. Instead of being this kind of ephemeral piece of paper, now it's become an object of art that's precious. I guess there's nothing I can do about that except take advantage of it.